This episode of Mr. Hutchings History is now streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all your favorite platforms like Castbox, Podcast Addict, and Amazon Music. Tune in now.
Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
All right, so today we're diving into one of those moments in history that, well, you just can't get away from, right? The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, World War II, Japan, the end of the war. We know the basics.
We think we do.
But, we're going to try to go a little deeper here.
Yeah.
Looking beyond just the military justifications, saving lives, ending the war quickly, all that.
Right.
We're going deep into the less explored stuff.
Okay.
The economic and scientific factors that, they played a role too.
They did.
We've got a whole stack of research, firsthand accounts, even found a little snippet from like a 1940s economics journal.
Oh, wow.
Get ready. Your assumptions might get challenged a little bit today.
I'm ready.
So it's fascinating to me how we often focus on like the morality of the decision, right?
Yeah.
But, we rarely look at the economics of this whole thing.
It's a huge part of the story. The Manhattan Project, for example. Colossal undertaking. Cost over $2 billion. In 1940s money.
Okay, stop right there for a second. $2 billion. Even back then, that's just an insane amount of money. What could you even buy with that back then?
Think about it this way. That's over $30 billion in today's money.
Wow.
You could fund several major social programs with that. Build hospitals, schools, jumpstart whole new industries even. You could rebuild war-torn Europe with that kind of cash.
Yeah.
Instead, they poured it into this single, incredibly destructive project.
It's like it's like putting all your eggs in one really, really explosive basket and then feeling all this pressure to actually use that basket, or the bomb, I guess, in this case.
Exactly. Imagine the political climate at the time. The war's winding down, but the U.S. has just dumped an unprecedented amount of resources into this secret weapon.
Right.
They had to justify that expense, especially as everyone's starting to think about post-war recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like that saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. So is that what happened? They created this incredibly powerful weapon, and suddenly the world was full of nails.
I think there's a strong case to be made there. And there's a pretty revealing anecdote about Secretary of State James Burns.
Okay.
He basically told a bunch of industrialists point blank that the bomb would be used. Not might be used, not could be used.
So it was a certainty.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a certainty.
So what does that tell us about, the mindset at the time?
I think it shows just how interwoven the economics and the politics were around the Manhattan Project. It wasn't just a weapon. It was the symbol of American power, of ingenuity. It was a way to justify that enormous investment.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a military decision. It was a statement. It was a way to ensure that, the whole world understood America's might.
Especially, I'm guessing, the Soviets. I mean, this is right when the Cold War is heating up.
Exactly. So you've got this emerging superpower, and the U.S. is very aware of them.
Right.
The bomb becomes, in a way, a bargaining chip, a way to shape the post-war world order.
But hold on a sec. Weren't the scientists also thinking about all of this? I mean, this was a brand new kind of weapon. Nobody had ever seen anything like it.
Absolutely. You can't forget about the scientists. They weren't just developing a weapon. They were pushing the boundaries of physics.
Yeah.
They were, delving into the nature of matter and energy.
So did they see Hiroshima and Nagasaki as these giant, horrific experiments? Did they have this scientific drive to see the weapon actually used?
That's a tough question, a really complex question. But to answer it, you have to consider where nuclear physics was at that time.
Yeah.
Scientists, they knew splitting the atom released a tremendous amount of energy, but they were still figuring out the specifics. How much energy? What kinds of radiation would be produced? What would the long-term effects be? And so, in a terrible way, the bombs gave them a chance to collect real-world data on a scale that had never been possible before.
Right. So they weren't just trying to blow things up. They were trying to answer some pretty fundamental questions about nuclear physics. I guess the war, it gave them this horrific opportunity to do that.
Yes. It's a difficult truth to confront. And it brings up all sorts of ethical dilemmas, especially when you consider that some cities were deliberately spared from conventional bombing.
Wait, what? Spared? What do you mean?
There's evidence suggesting that cities like Hiroshima were intentionally left off the target lists for the firebombing rates.
Really?
Yeah. And the reasoning,
I don't even know. Why?
they wanted a clean slate.
Huh.
A clean slate to study the effects of the atomic bomb. They didn't want the data to be messed up by damage that was already there.
Wow. That's a lot to process. I mean, they were so focused on getting good data that they,
It's chilling.
yeah, they basically preserved the scientific integrity, I guess you could call it, of their data, even though people's lives were at stake. It's hard to even wrap my head around that.
It's a chilling realization. It forces us to confront the ethical boundaries of science, especially when it's tied to such devastating consequences.
Yeah.
It's also important to remember that not all scientists were on board with this approach.
Oh, really?
There was a group, they called themselves the Chicago Group, who were vehemently opposed to using the bomb on cities.
Okay. Tell me more about them.
They were led by a physicist named Leo Szilard, and they argued that, a demonstration on a deserted island would be enough.
Okay, yeah.
Just to show how powerful the bomb was.
Right.
Potentially force Japan's surrender. But without all the civilian casualties, they even wrote a petition to President Truman, urging him to reconsider.
So even within the scientific community, there were people who were really pushing back against using the bomb in this way. That adds a whole other layer to the debate. It wasn't just all the scientists cheering for their creation to be unleashed.
Yeah, absolutely not. It was a deeply complex situation, morally challenging. Even for the scientists who created it, they understood the power they had unleashed, and some were very conflicted about the potential consequences.
Yeah. So we've got economic pressure, scientific curiosity, this whole cloud of moral ambiguity hanging over everything. It feels like every layer we peel back just reveals another tangle of motivations.
Yeah.
But we can't forget about the main argument, right?
Right.
The one about saving American lives,
Yeah.
avoiding a bloody invasion of Japan.
That's right. That's the orthodox view, the
Yeah.
one that's been dominant for decades.
Hmm.
It emphasizes the potential for just catastrophic casualties in an invasion of mainland Japan. Operation Downfall, they called it.
Right.
Projected to result in over 1 million American casualties.
Oh, wow.
Potentially even more Japanese losses.
1 million casualties. I can't even, 1 million people. That's more than the entire population of some countries. It's just mind-boggling.
And that's the crux of the argument, the sheer scale of the potential loss of life. It becomes its own justification. Yeah.
The idea that the bombs, as horrific as they were, might have actually saved lives in the long run.
Yeah.
That's the argument.
Yeah. That's got to be one of the heaviest burdens of leadership, right?
Yeah.
Weighing that immediate horror against the potential for even greater suffering. It's not a decision I'd wish on anybody.
Absolutely. But even with all that, the picture still isn't complete. We still haven't factored in the Cold War. The U.S. was very aware of the Soviet Union and their growing influence.
Right. The whole atomic diplomacy angle. Was the bomb also meant as a message to the Soviets? Like, hey, look at what we can do. A way to, flex their nuclear muscles on the world stage.
That's the revisionist argument, and it's gained a lot of traction over the years. It suggests that the bombings weren't just about ending the war with Japan.
Right.
They were also about sending a very clear signal to the Soviet Union.
About America's power. Exactly. So you've got military necessity, economic pressures, scientific curiosity, and now this Cold War power play. Every piece of the puzzle just adds another layer of complexity.
Yeah.
It's what makes this such a fascinating, albeit disturbing, topic to explore. You have to consider all of these factors, all of these motivations.
Right.
And then you might begin to understand the true weight of the decision to use those atomic bombs.
Well, I don't know about you, but my brain is already doing backflips trying to process all this.
Yeah.
And we're just getting started.
This is just the tip of the iceberg. So much more to unpack, so many perspectives to consider. As we go deeper, we'll start to see how all these different threads weave together.
All right. You've definitely piqued my curiosity.
Good.
Keep digging.
When we're thinking about all these different motivations, it's helpful to understand how historians have interpreted this event over the years.
Okay.
They've grouped these various interpretations into what we call schools of thought.
Schools of...
Think of them like different lenses for looking at the same picture.
Okay, I like that analogy.
You put on different colored glasses and you see how the image changes.
Yeah.
So what kinds of historical lenses are we talking about here?
Right. What are we looking through?
Well, first you've got the orthodox historians.
Orthodox.
Yeah, they generally stick with the traditional narrative.
Okay, the traditional narrative.
The one that argues that using the bombs was a necessary evil.
Right.
It was horrific, But it was necessary to end the war quickly and save lives on both sides.
Oh, yeah.
Prevent a full-scale invasion of mainland Japan.
So for them, the atomic bombs were the lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
Horrific, but ultimately they prevented a greater tragedy.
That's the argument. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, you have the revisionist historians.
Revisionist.
They challenge that whole narrative. They argue that the primary motivation wasn't about saving lives at all.
Okay, then what was it about?
Geopolitics.
It was a demonstration of American power, a way to intimidate the Soviets and shape the post-war world in their favor.
So it was basically like this big "don't mess with us" message.
Yeah.
Delivered in the most explosive way possible.
You could say that.
Wow.
Now you've also got the post-revisionist historians.
Post-revisionist, okay.
They kind of try to bridge the gap between those two viewpoints.
So they see both sides.
Yeah, they acknowledge both the military and the diplomatic motivations.
Okay.
They recognize that the decision makers back then were operating in a really complex situation.
Yeah, that sounds more realistic, right?
Much more nuanced. Then there's the diplomatic historians.
Diplomatic, okay.
They zero in on the bomb's role as a diplomatic tool, specifically in the early Cold War.
Right.
They argue that it fundamentally changed how international relations worked. You know, ushered in this era where nuclear weapons became the ultimate deterrent.
Okay, so let me get this straight. We've got four main schools of thought here. Orthodox revisionist, post-revisionist, and diplomatic.
You got it.
Each one giving us a different lens to view the atomic bombings.
Different perspectives.
It's like each lens adds another piece to the puzzle,
Yeah.
but the full picture is still kind of fuzzy.
It's tough to grasp.
Yeah.
And, you know, that really speaks to how complex this event is. There's no easy answer, no single explanation that covers it all.
Right.
You have to grapple with all of it, the ethical dilemmas, the political calculations, the scientific breakthroughs, the long-lasting consequences, and then you might start to understand the weight of it all.
Yeah, you know, we've been talking a lot about numbers and motivations.
Right.
But what about the actual people whose lives were changed forever by these bombs?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We can't forget about the human cost.
It's easy to get lost in the big picture.
Yeah, sometimes a single story can help bring it all into focus.
You know, I love a good story.
Okay, well, I came across this account from a survivor in Hiroshima.
Okay.
He was just a child at the time.
Well,
He described the blinding flash, the deafening roar, and then just silence.
silence.
Like the world had stopped breathing.
Oh, wow.
And then the screams started the cries for help, the dust and debris raining down like a macabre snowfall.
Oh, my gosh. It's hard to even imagine being there in that moment.
Unimaginable.
The terror, the confusion, just everything.
It's overwhelming to think about.
And that's just one story.
Yeah.
One person out of tens of thousands.
Multiply that by tens of thousands,
Yeah.
and then you begin to grasp the true human cost.
Entire families gone, communities decimated.
A whole generation scarred by the physical and psychological wounds of that day.
It's hard to even comprehend.
It is.
You know, we talk about these scientific advancements and geopolitical strategies,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, it's the human stories that hit the hardest.
They bring it home.
The individual lives lost the dreams, shattered the futures, forever altered.
And the ripple effects, they go way beyond that initial blast.
Right.
We're talking long-term health problems, radiation sickness, genetic mutations, environmental damage. The list goes on and on.
Wow, generations later, and people are still dealing with the legacy of these bombs.
Yeah.
It's like this sobering reminder that decisions made by people in power can have consequences that echo through time.
It's a powerful lesson, and it highlights the need for ethical considerations in every decision we make.
Especially when you're dealing with something as powerful as nuclear weapons.
Absolutely.
It's like we've opened Pandora's box and we're still trying to figure out how to close it.
That's a good way to put it, and it emphasizes that we can't erase the past.
No, we can't.
But we can learn from it, grapple with it, acknowledge its lasting impact on our world.
Okay, so how do we even begin to make sense of all of this? We've got these competing narratives,
Right.
economic pressures, scientific advancements, political maneuvering, and this just immeasurable human cost.
Yeah.
It feels almost overwhelming.
It is overwhelming, but the key is to keep asking questions.
Keep asking questions.
Keep challenging what we think we know. Keep listening to the stories of those who lived through it.
Okay, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, and most importantly, we have to keep striving for a future where these horrors are never repeated.
That's a good goal.
It is.
Okay, but how do we as individuals actually contribute to that? What can we do with all this information, all this awareness?
Well, for starters, we can educate ourselves.
Okay.
We can't just rely on oversimplified narratives or catchy sound bites.
Right.
We have to dig deeper, seek out diverse perspectives, and have real thoughtful discussions about these issues.
So we need to go beyond just the headlines.
Yeah.
Wrestle with the nuances, the ethical dilemmas,
Yeah.
the historical context.
Exactly.
Right.
And we can also advocate for policies that promote peace, policies that prioritize disarmament and non-proliferation.
Right.
We can support organizations that are working to address the ongoing consequences of nuclear testing and radiation exposure.
So we can support those organizations. Maybe donate our time, amplify their message.
Exactly. You can also contact your elected officials, let them know this is something you care about.
Right. Make our voices heard.
Advocate for policies that put diplomacy over military buildup, that support international cooperation and arms control treaties.
So it's about using our voices, our votes, our wallets
It all plays a part.
to create change from the bottom up and the top down.
You got it.
Okay, I like it.
And don't underestimate the power of simply choosing peace in your everyday life.
Choosing peace.
Yeah, practice empathy, challenge prejudice, promote understanding.
Okay.
Those seemingly small actions, they contribute to a culture of peace.
Right.
And that can make a real difference in the long run.
It's about recognizing that peace isn't just the absence of war.
No, it's not.
It's something we actively choose.
It's a choice we make.
Yeah, and how we interact with each other every day.
Exactly. And remember, we're all connected.
We are.
What happens in one part of the world affects us all.
It does.
The threat of nuclear war is a global issue,
Right.
and it needs a global response.
So we need to work together, right?
Yeah, build bridges, foster dialogue,
Find solutions that work for everybody.
solutions that benefit all of humanity.
Okay.
And that starts with each of us taking responsibility, taking action, and refusing to accept the status quo.
I like that. Refusing to accept the status quo.
Yeah, we have to keep pushing for something better.
So we've covered a lot today.
We have.
From the economics of the Manhattan Project
Yeah.
to the scientific motivations, the geopolitics,
The human cost.
the human cost, the actions we can take to build a better future.
It's a lot to take in.
It's been a whirlwind of information and emotions.
It's heavy stuff, but knowledge is power.
It is.
And understanding the past can help us navigate the challenges of today
Yeah.
and build a better future.
So as we wrap up, what's the one key takeaway you want listeners to remember?
Never forget the human cost.
The human cost.
Behind every statistic, every historical narrative, there are real people.
Right.
People whose lives were forever changed by these events. Let their stories guide your actions and inspire you to work towards a world free from the threat of nuclear war.
Okay, so listeners, this conversation doesn't end here.
Keep learning.
Keep questioning.
Keep engaging.
Keep making those ripples.
And until next time.
Stay curious. All right, so we're fired up. We're ready to make a difference, but where do we even start? It feels like such a big issue, a global issue, you know?
It's easy to feel overwhelmed,
Yeah.
but every movement starts with individual action.
Go.
Think of it like a ripple effect.
Okay.
Even small actions, they can spread outward.
I like that. So what are some of the ripples we can create?
Well, the first step is staying informed.
Right.
Don't let this just be a one-time thing.
Right.
Keep learning, keep researching.
Stay up to date.
Yeah, stay up to date on what's happening with nuclear weapons and disarmament efforts.
So don't let the conversation end here, even after the episode's over.
Yeah, and share what you learn.
Okay.
Talk to your friends, family, colleagues.
Spread the word.
Raise awareness. Spark conversations. Encourage people to think critically.
Yeah.
You might be surprised by the impact you can have just by talking about it.
Just by talking about it.
Yeah, it's like planting seeds.
Seeds of awareness.
That can grow into something much bigger.
And there are organizations out there already doing amazing work.
Oh, yeah. Ton.
Doing the hard work so we can support them.
Exactly.
Maybe donate, volunteer, amplify their message.
All of that.
Awesome.
You can also contact your elected officials, you know?
Right.
Let them know this is an issue you care about.
Yeah.
Advocate for policies that prioritize diplomacy that support arms control treaties.
Okay, so we can use our voices, our votes, our wallets to try to create change?
From all angles.
From all angles. Okay.
And, don't underestimate the power of choosing peace.
Choosing peace.
In your daily life.
Okay.
Practice empathy, challenge prejudice, promote understanding.
Right.
All those things contribute to a culture of peace.
Yeah.
And that can have a ripple effect, too.
It's recognizing that peace isn't just the absence of war, right?
No. It's an active choice.
It's a choice we make every day.
Every single day in how we interact with each other.
And we're all connected in this.
They're all connected.
What happens on one side of the planet affects everyone else.
It really does.
So this threat of nuclear war,
Yeah.
it's a global issue.
And it needs a global response.
We have to work together.
Yeah, build bridges, foster dialogue.
Find solutions that work for everybody.
For all of humanity.
Okay, so that starts with each of us taking responsibility.
Taking action.
Refusing to just accept things the way they are.
Status quo, you can't just sit back.
Wow, we've covered so much ground today.
I know, right?
From the economics of the Manhattan Project to the science, the politics, the human cost, the actions we can take
It's a lot.
to build a better future. It's been a whirlwind
It has.
of information and emotion.
But it's important stuff.
Yeah,
Knowledge is power.
absolutely.
And understanding the past can help us deal with the present.
And create a better future.
That's the goal.
So as we wrap up this whole deep dive, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from all of this?
Never forget the human cost.
Never forget the human cost.
Behind all the numbers, all the history, there are real people
Yeah.
whose lives were changed forever by these events. Let their stories guide you
Yeah.
and inspire you to work for a world without nuclear weapons.
That's beautiful.
It's what we should all be striving for.
Absolutely. So listeners, keep learning, keep asking questions,
It's engaging.
keep making those ripples.
Until next time.
Stay curious.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.